Hello. If you're only joining us now, I'm Reverend G, minister at the Unitarian Universalist Community Church on Shaver Road in Portage, and I'm so delighted that you chose to join us on this morning. And happy Mother's Day to you. Happy Mother's Day to all of you. We mother in so many different ways. We mother to so many different things, people, animals, plants, environment. Mothering shows up in so many ways, and it's all valuable, it's all necessary and worth celebrating. And then there are those among us who are wannabe mothers, and they are wondering, but should I bring a child into this world? How is that going to work out? If you turn on the news or your news feed on your computer, um, it doesn't take long to realize that there are some very serious problems in this world. If all people on this planet were to live at the comfort level of an average American, we would need 4.5 to 5 planets. But we don't have that. We barely have one. In fact, I would argue we don't have one left. We live in the midst of a mass extinction. There are species every day that go extinct forever. Forever. That's a problem. Our environment is topsy-turvy. We've affected it in such harmful ways that life is becoming impossible. So if we think a generation or two ahead, there's the concern, should we bring a child into an environment like this? The political discourse, it is disheartening at best, but at worst it's disgusting. It is angry. It is dirty. Nationalism is on the rise. Nationalism that looks a whole lot like fascism is on the rise, not just in this country, but across the globe. Why is that? That should be a concern. Then, of course, there is this virus. The question is, will there be any more viruses? Quite likely, yes. So, should we bring a child into this world? There are these serious concerns. So, how should we address that? And I suggest that we all address these issues as a mother would. That we should all consider ourselves mothers to the environment, to all living things, and all people on this planet, which requires of us to think in ways that are maximally inclusive, which fosters care for those among us who are most vulnerable. All of them who are most vulnerable. I suggest that we all become mother to all that is. And that requires compassion, that requires care, that requires that 7th-generation thinking that Native Americans practice. Whenever they make a decision, they think 7 generations ahead. How will that impact? How will this decision impact the 7th generation? And if I can foresee that it will impact them in a harmful way, even though it is really beneficial to me here today, that is a decision that I will discard. Instead, I will sacrifice here today so the 7th generation down the road may have a life, may have a chance, may have a future. Now, of course, there are some mothers who are not very good mothers. There are some mothers who tend to be just a little bit more selfish, definitely less inclusive, who might only care about themselves and their little family unit. And yes, that is true, and that is probably not going to change. However, I am quite aware that we all, each and every one of us, has a decision to make. We have a choice here of how we are going to be, of how I am going to be, how I choose to show up in this world, how I choose to relate to all that I come in touch with and all that I don't come in touch with, but I care for anyway. And it may mean sacrificing, it may mean delaying gratification. This is all the kind of stuff that mothers know. You know, when I grew up, it was communism. There was a shortage of many, many things. After I turned 7 years old, food became unavailable. And I do remember my mother often saying she's not hungry anymore, even though she ate very, very little. And she said that so the rest of us, her children, the three of us, could have another bite. It's that sacrifice. It's that understanding. It's also that understanding that we plant the seeds in the darkest times. We plant seeds when growth is barely noticeable around us. You know, we could be overwhelmed by the conditions. We could be overwhelmed by the gravity of the problems, by the grandiosity of the problems. And still we have a choice. That instead of giving up, and instead of resigning ourselves that I'm too small, there's nothing I can do, instead, we look for ways to collaborate and plant seeds now, in the darkest of time. Plant the seeds of light, so later we may all have light. And it is always easier to come up with these highfalutin ideas. It may seem like, gee, you're dreaming here. You're dreaming that this can be possible, that we will all relate to the world like mothers, that we will all care for the most vulnerable among us. And let me tell you something. I told you that I grew up in communism, and the dictator that ruled Romania, where I grew up, was Ceausescu, and he was a terrible dictator. He fell. I saw that. I didn't think it possible, but he's gone. His history. I've seen apartheid end. I've seen other dictators fall. I am gay, and today I am married, happily married to my wife. And decades ago, that seemed absolutely impossible. I didn't think that it could happen in my lifetime. And it did. It has. And today, it almost seems inevitable. Somehow, the impossible becomes possible. And soon after that, it becomes inevitable. Well, there are things today that seem impossible to us. It seems impossible that Republicans and Democrats could come together and have civil conversations and find common ground. It seems impossible that we are going to be willing to engage the conversation around what is economy for? What is it about? Who should it serve? Should people serve the economy? Should the economy serve the people? Why should we have an economy? What should it look like? It may be impossible today to imagine that we could bring balance between nature, Mother Nature, and ourselves, to live in a harmonious balance where we honor the environment, the animal kingdom, and in return, we can have a life of possibilities, prosperity, harmony, where mass extinction is curtailed, where war becomes a thing of the past. These things seem absolutely impossible to us. But I tell you, the impossible has already happened many times throughout history, and it can and it will happen again. And that requires for us to plant the seeds in the darkest of times, to plant the seeds now. It requires those of us who can come up with the dream, and then the rest of us who can come together, put our shoulders together, and then figure it out. How do we do this? How do we make it possible? How do we make it manifest? So those mothers, wannabe mothers, may confidently bring a child into this world, knowing that there's a tomorrow for them, knowing that there's a tomorrow for their children's children, knowing that we can live and that we can create a life that sustains us all with dignity, possibility, prosperity, harmony, compassion, kindness, and love. And what does it take? It takes love. Now, we create possibilities and circumstances all the time. Every decision we make has an impact on tomorrow, on a day after tomorrow, on the next generation. So, most decisions that we make unconsciously, on autopilot. What if we raised our consciousness around our decisions? If we brought awareness to our decisions and adopted the Native American 7th-generation thinking, how will this impact the 7th generation from me? If it is going to impact them positively, it's a good decision, let's do it. If it's going to impact them negatively, even though today it would be extremely beneficial for me, it's a no. It's a no for me. I am willing to sacrifice as a mother would. And what does this mothering require most of all? You got it. It's love. And then you may say, love, G? Isn't that just a little bit naive? Isn't that just a little bit pie in the sky? And I say no. I say no. I say love has to be part of the political process. In fact, Martin Luther King Jr. said in public, love looks like justice. Every policy that we make speaks of the values that we hold. Every single policy that our politicians implement, that they vote on, that they bring into reality, into the lives of people, represent the values, our core values. Well, what if love is not our core value? Then we punish those, we prosecute those who leave water in the desert for the migrants. If love is not a core value of our policies, we will separate children from their parents and cage them for a long, long time during their most formative years. A mother would never do that. A mother would bring water to a thirsty person because a mother understands that migration, just like mothering, is an act of hope. Yes, it's also an act of desperation, but on the other side is an act of hope. So yes, let us start mothering the environment, the global community, all things living, so we may have future. So our children and our children's children may have a future. Let's make, once again, the impossible possible and therefore inevitable. There were always dark times in the past that we fixed, that we rectified, that we undid. We did it then. We can do it again and again and again. And it requires all of us. And it requires every single one of us to take a look at this one, how we relate to the world, because we have a choice to make. Every single one has a choice to make. And you do not have to be a woman to be a mother. You don't even have to have a child to be a mother. You just have to care, you just have to love, and take care of those who are most vulnerable among us. And today that's the environment. Today there's people who are displaced by global warming, people who are being exploited because the gap between the haves and the have-nots is so huge, and there are the many who are being exploited in so many ways. The migrants, who we understand that they leave their home in hope of a better future, and because life has become impossible where they were at. Nobody wants to emigrate. Some adventurous people do. They will always move around, but most people don't want to be uprooted. Most people don't want to leave their families, the culture that they know. They want to stay. And I know that because I'm an immigrant and I'm the only one from my family who's in this country. The rest of my family wouldn't hear of it. Immigration is not that easy. It's an act of desperation, but an even stronger act of hope. So may we be mothers to this earth, to each other. May we learn to live in an inclusive way where we embrace this entire global community, where nationalism shrinks and globalism expands, where we understand that what happens to you matters to me. What happens to me should matter to you. We are interdependent. And if we didn't know that before, this virus should have driven that message home, loud and strong. So here's to mothering. Here's to loving this world, to health, to prosperity. Here's to leaving this place better than we found it. It is what every mother wishes for their offspring, for them to have a better life than we have right now. And together, only together, can we do it. So here's to mothering. And so it is.